Hi, my name is Dr. Brad Reedy. I'm with Evoke Therapy Programs. What I would like to do during this webinar is introduce you to the basic philosophy at Evoke Wilderness Therapy Programs. Many of you parents will be watching this after your child has recently enrolled in the program, and we want you to be comfortable with the overall philosophy and what goes on at Evoke. So hopefully you're watching this early on in the process as you acclimate to this new wonderful intervention. Let's first talk about the idea of wilderness and why wilderness is so effective. One of the reasons that it's very effective is because it doesn't just use talk therapy. And we know that talk therapy for adolescents and young adults isn't the most effective at getting past that resistance, that reluctance to really get into their work or to access what trauma might be lurking below, or also to be able to help them express themselves. So the metaphor of camping, the metaphor of small communal nomadic living, primitive living skills become this wonderful metaphor around which we can begin to have discussions about what's going on in their life. And because a lot of our trauma, our resistance is not stored in our conscious mind or in the verbal areas of our mind, really engaging the body in activities and activities that have metaphors associated with them is some of the most effective ways at getting access to what's going on inside of the young adult or adolescent. It's a very small group of students or clients, anywhere from about 6 to 10 students with staff ratios of 3 or 4, depending upon group size. And in that kind of a milieu, you can really build a positive culture. And you can really observe the culture and watch how the influences that they have on each other, how it affects them, what their vulnerability is to peer pressure, how they can also move through the stages of the program and eventually become a mentor. And we know that the positive mentoring that goes on in our program is as helpful for the person doing it as it is for the person that's being mentored. But we try to use our peers, we try to use the peer system as much as we can to try to promote change in the program. And that's some of the reasons that early on in the program, that early mentor becomes so influential as they first enter the program. The ability to go through something challenging or difficult is one of the greatest contributions that we can make to self-esteem in our lives. I think all of us can relate to that, right? We can relate to doing something difficult and feeling good about ourselves. And so that sense of efficacy, that what I do makes a difference in my life, is so apparent in the here and now of wilderness living, of primitive living, of wilderness therapy. That sense of accomplishment. And then part of what gives us an identity, and I think wilderness does this so well, is that we learn a healthy balance between self-sufficiency, being self-sufficient, but also learning the healthy aspects of interdependence, the ability to rely on and need other people and how other people can help us in our life. And so we start to figure out where we start and where others stop, who we are in this process. And all of that happens in this small milieu, this powerful metaphorical milieu. The group becomes a microcosm for their life. I cannot tell you how often a parent will say to their wilderness therapist, "You get my child," in the first week, in the first few minutes of the first week. And the reason that I think it's so easy to see adolescents and young adults clients in this process is the group becomes like the family was at home, right? We get that impact letter from you at the end of week one, somewhere around the end of week one. And we often say, we see the same kinds of relationships, the same kind of behaviors going on here in the group with certain group members. So because the group is so tight knit and close, and because they rely on each other for all that they do, and they're always working together, we see a replication of the family relationships, a replication of the issues that were going on at home. You're definitely removing a lot of distractions. And unplugging today is maybe more important than it ever has been. And I think wilderness therapy was good 15 or 20 years ago when I was new to it. But with the digital immersion that most of us, let alone our adolescent and young adult children, are exposed to, unplugging from that, learning to be mindful, learning to be present, learning to feel what your body is telling you, learning to feel what your emotions are telling you, learning to think in the quietness, all of the removal of those unsupervised negative peer influences, right? It provides us a wonderful opportunity to get clients and students in touch with themselves in this process. And the removing the defenses gets them outside of their comfort zone, right? And oftentimes it's outside of our comfort zone when we are most exposed or vulnerable or feel or raw. And so it does that for our clients and students for sure. You can't manipulate wilderness. Sometimes I want to. Sometimes I get frustrated with the weather, the rain, the cold, the snow, the bugs, whatever it is. But it does give you an opportunity, maybe like nothing else, to realize that it's not about controlling what's going on outside of me, but it's learning how to cope with it and learning how to deal with it. See, wilderness therapy and communal living and nomadic living, it's not just a vehicle for therapy, it becomes the therapy, it becomes the teacher, it becomes the adversary. And then the individual client or student becomes the hero of their own story. We definitely talk about the rites of passage model as being an important part of our program, right? We're initiating each period of growth, each stage of growth with ceremony. We have welcome ceremony, we have gift ceremony, we have transition ceremonies, we have goodbye ceremonies. We have different levels of responsibility that are awarded to you as you move through the program. And all of those rites of passage become meaningful, give meaning to what's going on, give a ceremonial kind of learning or teaching to the child in addition to anything that might be didactic or spoken or written. It's a wonderful assessment because of the microcosm, because of the removal of the defenses, because of the level of supervision, because by nature of wilderness therapy, it's a raw experience. It's a wonderful place to be able to observe and assess clients and students. Powerful. You're removing negative influences that are unsupervised. That's very clear because there are times when there are going to be peers that are being negative. Your child might be one of those peers at a given time, but it's not unsupervised, right? They're not allowed to go off and have conversations or talk to each other outside of staff's earshot. So in that way, we're treating in real time the kind of dynamics and relationships that they were struggling with or influenced by at home. So it's important to understand it's the removal of negative, unsupervised influences in their lives. I've already talked about this vulnerability that comes. Students will attribute the beauty and the appreciation of nature as one of the most powerful contributors to their change in this process. And it also, along with the beauty, along with the sense of serenity it offers, at times the perspective about spirituality that it offers, it also can be difficult and challenging. Right? It's not what most of us are comfortable with. And everything takes intention. Keeping clean takes intention. Keeping dry takes intention. Feeding yourself, keeping your hygiene in the wintertime, keeping warm. All of these things take intention. You can't take them for granted. So in that way, everything is more likely to provoke or evoke a feeling as opposed to just talking about it. I've talked about interdependence. One of my favorite pieces to observe in wilderness therapy is that children and clients, students and clients, have to experience the futility of their old ways of coping. And so that's why we don't start off with week one with dramatic change. They'll usually try to some extent what has worked for them. And sometimes they need to try it 4 or 10 or 20 times. And so in that way, we're not treating a historical problem. We're treating a current issue that we get to see, and treat in real time. This is an ecosystemic model. And this is something that we at Evoke developed in this process. That we're going to treat the family, we're going to support the family, we're going to educate the family. That's what these webinars are about, and our parent meetings and our parent workshops and our parent and family intensives are about. Our parent curriculum, our parent portal, all of that is to support the entire system. The field staff are huge contributors to the process. Students and clients attribute field staff as the number one contributor to their change. Parents talk about the therapist because the therapist becomes the filter, right? The doorway to your child's experience. But those field staff, their wonderful, unique creativity, their counterculture attitude. These are people that live outside for 8 days in a row, every other week, right? But they bring the same kind of values and principles that you want your children to learn, but they come at it from an alternative perspective. They're incredibly powerful. Using the educational consultant to be this thread that weaves its way through all of therapy is, in our opinion, a crucial aspect of the treatment model. Of course, the wilderness therapist, a home therapist that can be doing parent coaching, can help guide you with letters above and beyond what the wilderness therapist will do during their 1 hour a week phone call. But they can also help you get into your own pain, your own trauma, your own difficulty, the things that get in the way of you knowing your truth and accessing your wisdom. And of course, primitive living is a critical piece of it. It's the disruption of an old systemic pattern and an immersion into a new one. Wilderness therapy turns up the volume. Somebody once said that wilderness therapy is spending time with yourself and seeing how you like the company. And so you show up, you appear, you make yourself known throughout the experience as a client in wilderness therapy. We do that through also the repetition of principles, the repetition of behaviors, the repetition of coaching, the various enactments. Enactments is a therapeutic word that means that a certain interaction, a certain interaction with another person or an event or a situation, we put the spotlight on it. We turn up the volume and we analyze it and talk about it and make meaning out of it. Natural and logical consequences, the farther away, and I'll talk about this later, the farther away the consequences are from being contrived, the more likely they are to be internalized by the adolescent, young adult, by any of us for that matter. So the natural ones that just happen, obviously we're going to keep them safe, but sometimes they're going to be cold and uncomfortable. Sometimes if they don't pay attention to the way that they pack their pack, it's going to be lopsided. If they're not working on their spoon, they're going to have a spoon that doesn't work very well. If they're not making their fire, they're not going to have the same amount of time sitting around a fire, right? So all of those things become grist for the mill. The field staff's job is ultimately keep them safe, but it's okay for them to experience some discomfort, some challenge. I remember years ago, I had a student come up and start complaining about having to take a shower. They have to take a shower at least a couple of times a week. And the staff tried to talk him out of his feelings. I said, it's okay, this is part of it. He needs to learn how to feel. And he needs to learn that everything out here that we take for granted at home takes effort, takes conscious effort and concentration and work. The shift from external to internal locus of control, that is to say, internal locus of control is that what I do makes a difference. External locus of control is what happens to me makes the biggest difference. So we see in our research that clients and students move from a focus on what happens to them to how they respond to it. And that's shifting to an empowered sense. It's moving away from the depression and the anxiety of learned helplessness. And it's moving into a sense of empowerment in the process. There is, of course, we're a residential program without walls. And I think that not having the walls psychologically creates a different kind of feeling, right? We have leverage. They have to be here essentially. They can't just walk out or walk across the street. And because of that, we're able to engage in some really, really powerful interventions. They'll come to us for therapy. They want to do work in this process. So what are the goals of wilderness therapy? There's 10 goals that I've listed here that things that wilderness therapy typically accomplishes. First and foremost, it can be a wake-up call. It does get your child's attention. And it creates a new bottom, right? Like, I'm here and I want something different in my life. Although wilderness ends up being something that they have a great affinity for by the end of the program, it still is being away from home, being out of the mainstream, being away from loved ones, and that can become a part of a new bottom. I think it's oftentimes an opportunity for the family to take a time out during a crisis, to gather themselves, to make an assessment, to decide on a long-term plan. So it becomes a kind of a timeout for the family. Obviously, there is a therapeutic benefit. I've never seen more rapid and effective results than I have in wilderness therapy in my practice. And many of our students and clients and parents say that long after they were in wilderness therapy. And we do that by creating individualized treatment plans, by using the metaphor, right? By creating experiential change, experiential activities, experiential therapy. So that's a part of what goes on, of course. It provides an evaluative feedback, that assessment piece, what worked. Even in the cases, the rare cases where a child really struggles throughout, we start to learn what doesn't work. And we start to create feedback, right? An evaluation that provides information for a recommendation that's going to give your child the best chance of being successful going forward. It's a great opportunity not only to access clients and students, but their families. It creates a new kind of system focus. Letter writing therapy, even in my private practice, I've thought I would really like to see more letter writing in families because you can really slow things down. You can really become intentional about your language and become more conscious of what you're saying and what you're listening to or not listening to for that matter. So it's a wonderful systemic intervention. It's preparation from the next step. I talk about how clients and students move from resignation, sometimes even before that, anger and denial, but resignation to eventual acceptance to often investment in this process. And so you see them ready for a different level of care, a different level of supervision after wilderness therapy than you would have seen them before wilderness therapy. It's a great preparation. It has that softening effect, right? Takes off the rough edges. We can fight some significant battles. We can deal with some pretty significant resistance in wilderness therapy because of the levels of supervision, because of the small group sizes, because it's a here and now kind of therapy. Because of all of that, we can get through past some of those initial pieces of resistance to the point that they're working on deeper, more subtle issues and get them ready for other kinds of programs, other levels of care. I've talked about levels of care now, socialization skills. It's a wonderful place to practice communication skills. Not only are the students, of course, out there in these closed groups, which means that they're not interacting with other groups, but the staff are there, like I said, for 8 days. And so you get a kind of follow through that you don't get when staff in programs are moving through shifts of 8 hours or 12 hours or even day long shifts. So socialization skills and following up on that can be really, really consistent, really effective. Of course, there's the objective testing that can come in as a part of this, where you can have a psychologist when they're clean, when their anxiety is reduced, when they're present, providing them evaluations can be a wonderful augmentation to the evaluation process. And of course, this is a stable, consistent environment. In terms of the family program, each family is offered a mentor at the beginning of the program. You can talk to your parent coordinator about that. And these mentors are there to help you through that first week or two of anxiety and difficulty and fear and the unknown. These are families that have volunteered to serve in that role to families coming in. You have a parent coordinator or a family coordinator that helps you with logistics day to day, that can help train you on the parent portal, that can answer your daily questions. So all of those don't need to be answered when the therapist can get to it when they're out in the field on other phone calls. That parent coordinator is at each program there to assist you in anything you might need. Of course, we have a robust, private, secure parent portal. And you're going to be assigned readings during or through that portal, and also some writing assignments. Some you'll be asked to share with at least one other person. You can talk to your therapist about who that might be. These webinars will be assigned to you each week regularly, and also your Evoke therapist can also add some that they think are specifically good for your family, a good fit for your family. Attending AA groups, Al-Anon groups, codependence groups, families anonymous groups. At the end of each webinar, I give you the websites that you can go to, or you can just Google them and find out meetings in your area, but we ask you to go to 6. We have a workshop that we would like every family to come to. It happens about every month, 5 weeks. So depending upon where you fit in that process, we'd like you to come to the parent workshop, and you get some hands-on experiential activities like your children, and you also get a lot of parent education and role playing. It can be scheduled in conjunction with a visit to your child. Talk to your therapist about that. Of course, visits middle of the program, end of the program, one parent, both parents. Our therapists at Evoke are going to be very creative and very specifically focused at finding out what might be or would not be best for your family in terms of visits. And then you have questions that you can send in, live webinars. I can answer them, and also you can have those addressed by the FAQs on our website or by your parent coordinator, your family coordinator. You have your weekly parent phone calls with the therapist where they'll go over, part of it is to go over the progress with your child. Part of it is to go over some of the letters that are coming and going back and forth, and some of those are specific assignments. And then talking about recommendations, talking about progress, talking about after Evoke, what's going to happen next, and preparing for that. We do 2 webinars twice a week. One is an open forum question and answer, and the other one is a topic. Of course, you're going to get some pictures. Some therapists will do videos, and that will come to you. You can almost see, most parents will say they can see the progress in their child by just looking at pictures as they move through the program. We have in-field phone calls. Every family broadly speaking, is a candidate for visits and phone calls. But your therapist will talk to you about why or why not it's appropriate at any given point in time to have these pieces of contact. And we want to be intentional about this. It's not just a certain point, or it's not just simply a reward. It's to do work. It's to make an assessment. Sometimes it is a reward, but oftentimes, just as likely, it's an opportunity to do work in real time. And it's harder. Phone calls and visits are harder than letter writing in many ways. I talked about mid-program visits, workshops, and support groups. We have the workshop about every 4 to 5 weeks. And then we have support groups in various areas of the country, and you can see those announced on our parent portal. You can also see those announced at the end of every live webinar. There are online group journals, and of course, you'll get access to your child's letters online there. And then we also have, as part of Evoke's new programming, parent intensives, 3-4 day parent intensive. We have 4 to 6 day family intensives. And then we also have a pursuits program, which is a high adventure program for young adults for right now, that you can come back to get a sober, have some sober fun, get a recharge. They are 7 to 14 day trips that you can do as a part of that. So go to our website for more information. This is one of the most commonly asked questions. This is what a typical day might look like. I've listed in the left-hand column an average schedule. And in the right-hand column, these are things that might happen during the day or several times a week. Wake up, we'll have a mindfulness activity often in the morning, breakfast, a morning group, a hike. There'll be some hiking time, oftentimes mid-morning or afternoon, depending upon the season. Of course, in the wintertime, we're going to do it in the middle of the day. In the summertime, we might do it at the beginning or the end of the day. There's personal time every day for reading and writing. There's also, each day we try to do something fun. We call it mandatory fun time, where we ask everybody to participate. We think it's an important part of mental health, and it's an important part of alleviating anxiety and depression. Camp setup is a big task during the day. They shift and rotate chores every day. There are different leaders often. And that becomes, like I said, grist for the mill, becomes work. It is in those activities that we oftentimes sit down, interrupt what we're doing. We'll have a conversation for 5 or minutes or 10 minutes or an hour, talking about that interaction. And what can we take out of that? And what does that look like? How does that look similar to the things that were going on at home, both for better or for worse? Dinner time, the food is actually really good, and they learn to cook out here. Group therapy in the evening, and then at night they might, depending upon how much sleep or how much energy, they might have games, songs, or stories, or do some readings in the evening. And oftentimes they can work, if they're better with their times, they can work to have more opportunities to do fun and games. Standing groups are spontaneous groups that are called by anybody at any given time. Those happen on average 1 time a day to 10 times a day. They can be 2 minutes or 20 minutes. So it's just an on-the-spot group. Individual sessions not only happen each week with the therapist, but also twice a week with the field staff. Layovers are days that we don't hike at all, where we work on laundry and logistics and letter writing. And those are typically the days that the therapists are there, so they can do all of their group activities and all of their reading and writing work that they're going to do with the students and clients. Showers twice a week. Food becomes a big part of managing food, of distributing food, of carrying the food, of cooking the food. Personal time, like I discussed, to do homework or to do schoolwork or to do therapeutic work or assignments, reading. Hard and soft skills. Hard skills are things like making a fire by rubbing sticks together, making a shelter. Soft skills are things like communication or talking about or articulating a feeling. So we try to focus a nice balance on hard skills and soft skills, because we think both of them become a part of the vehicle for change. We have academic work. They can get credits while they're with us. Letter writing to and from home becomes a major part. We don't tell them what to do in all their letters. There are some letters that are assigned. We coach them. We give them feedback. They'll often read letters to the group that they get from you or that they write to you, and they'll get feedback, but we don't tell them what to say. Chores become, like for a lot of the issues at home, become something that we work through. Like I said, everything becomes grist for the mill, and around all of this, there's time each day, every day, where they appreciate nature and they take it in, and it makes a difference in their lives. I want to talk about the underlying theory of wilderness therapy, and I'll just take a moment and talk about it from this perspective. Abraham Maslow is a sociologist who taught that we have ascending needs, and that our most basic needs, our safety and physical needs, have to be met. before we can work on community needs or a sense of self. This was his basic theory. It's an idea that most Americans would agree with, right? Most of us live or think that way. How can you work on who you are if you're worried about getting fed that day? Wilderness therapy suggests that it's in the context of struggling, in the context of feeding yourself, in the context of staying dry and staying warm and staying healthy, that we learn who we are, that we learn how to build community, that we see how we fit in, that we feel better about ourselves, and that we find ourselves. So wilderness therapy doesn't make this separation, this compartmentalization between the activity of living and the lessons of life. Like a lot of primitive cultures, we integrate them all into the same thing. They become the same thing. This is a great quote I've read from a wilderness researcher who said, whenever we adopted what we have come to call contrived experiences, the overall impact diminished for the participants. So the more natural it is, the more they think it's about life instead of about mom and dad and their unique perspective that they don't relate to. I just have some pictures here so it gives you a sense of what it looks like and feels like. These are just in the course of a hike, getting across a river and having to work together becomes an experiential activity. You have, of course, examples of fun. They're happy out there a lot. They play games. They work together, and they accomplish a lot of things. And like I said, that builds a lot of esteem and a sense of efficacy. I think the distance. All right, I know as a father, I know that distance can be difficult, but it is that distance that actually creates eventually the closeness. The first ingredient to healthy intimacy is a more complete sense of oneself. To the extent I have a complete sense of myself, is the extent that I can have an intimate relationship. So that distance is intentional. We work on the individuals, and so that when they come back together, they don't lose themselves in the other. They don't go back to placating or pleasing or rebellion, right? They don't get confused with power struggle, but they learn to connect, to hear, to be present, to be assertive, to know themselves, and to be able to know the other. Letter writing therapy, like I described, is an incredibly powerful version of what we do out here. And of course, the exposure to another culture in wilderness therapy, to Native American rites and rituals and rites of passage and stories become an important part of transmitting the values that you want them to learn, but not in the way that you look, not through the front door, but rather through the back door or the side door. Here's an example of a student who's just gone through a ceremony where she moved to a new phase in the program, and now she's given some alone time to meditate. So we've talked about wilderness therapy, but now why Evoke? What makes Evoke different? First of all, Evoke was the wilderness therapy program that changed the way that wilderness therapy was done, that added the level of clinical sophistication that rivals any residential treatment center or psychiatric hospital. But it's in a natural setting, in an experiential setting. But the therapists are expected to be able to conceptualize, to describe, to make prognostications and diagnoses at that same level. And so are our interventions. It is natural. You're out there in the dirt, you're out there in the mountains, you're out there in the snow, you're hiking. But the level of clinical sophistication, the lens that we look at it all through, is at the highest level. A focus on Evoke is mind, body, and spirit. We believe in a healthier diet. We believe in healthier sleeping. We believe in paying attention to your body. We believe in mindfulness. We know that it reduces anxiety, that it increases executive functioning, that it helps the client becomes their greatest advocate, the greatest asset in their own treatment. And we think about fostering and encouraging everybody's spirituality, relationship to everybody else in the world, to themselves, to their version of a higher power, and even to their religion or their family of origin. Individual treatment planning and length of stay, that's another thing that Evoke really pioneered. That it wasn't a set length of stay, that it's based on individual progress, and that there is a program format, right? There's a program structure, but it's very tailored. We rewrite the treatment plans each week and give a copy of those to the adolescent staff member, the staff member for the adolescents. And in the case of young adults, they actually get a copy of their rewritten treatment plan every week. And then the therapist shares those notes with you on their weekly phone call. We have an unprecedented safety record at Evoke, and we helped write the state regulations in Utah and had a heavy influence in Oregon to make sure that it was first and foremost safe. And your child is going to be safer just statistically speaking and realistically speaking, at Evoke in the wilderness, in the outdoors, than they are going to be at home. Group niche, we really thought about the fact that we can't be all things to all people if we have heterogeneous groups. But we have groups that tend to focus on other issues based on the therapist's expertise. The owners are involved in day to day operations at our sites. And of course, we believe in the inherent wisdom in all of our clients and students and have that respect. It's not about a hierarchical behavioral model, but rather about evoking, pulling out from the client or student or family member, for that matter, parent, the wisdom that's hidden beneath shame and fear, confusion, control, all those things. The level of family support is simply unprecedented in wilderness therapy. We have a belief. One of our core principles at Evoke is our commitment to organizational health. That we believe in supporting all of our therapists, all of our staff members, all of our executive team to take care of themselves, to practice healthy self-care, to do their own work, to do their own therapy. We have we have budgets set aside to be able to support people to do that. And then of course our willingness to innovate, to change, to adjust. It's not just that when we started the program that wilderness therapy changed forever, but it's that we're willing to change. I always say it's not what's great about Evoke today, but what's going to be great about Evoke is tomorrow. All right, let's see what else we have left. That's it. It's the last slide. So I hope that this gives you a basic introduction to Evoke therapy program so that you can begin to be comfortable with this. And if you have any questions, you can email them to webinar@drbradreedy.com. I'll be happy to answer those on a webinar. You can also bring those up with your parent coordinator or with your therapist during your weekly calls. And we're confident that this can be a powerful intervention, not just for your child, but for the entire family. And good luck on your journey. Take care. Bye-bye.